Let's face it, learning a language is a big undertaking. I mean, language is huge, right? So you're going to need a strategy to do this effectively. You can't just sit there on your app and just learning random words and, well, hope to be fluent. Believe me, I know. I'm a native English speaker who learned to speak Spanish fluently on his own out of necessity. So in this video, I'm going to show you the strategy that enabled me to do that. I'm going to share some tips with you, all right? I hope these tips work for you as well. Tip number 1. Focus on patterns in the language. This is extremely important and is the basis for everything that I teach on this particular channel. You see, learning a language is not just about memorizing words. It's about recognizing patterns in the language and being able to repeat those patterns. When you were very young, you learned the patterns of your native language listening to thousands of hours of that language on a continual basis. Now, whenever someone says something doesn't match that pattern, that audio pattern, you say, "That sounds wrong." Well, unfortunately, developing an ear for a language takes years, and as I said, thousands of hours of exposure to it. But don't worry, listening is not the only way to learn these patterns. Since you already speak at least one language, you're already way ahead of the game, because you can learn the patterns in Spanish by comparing them to the patterns you know in your own language. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to teach you a quick pattern, and I'm going to do it in English. The vast majority of tion words in English, and that's the ones ending in tion, can be converted into Spanish by changing the T to a C and adding an accent over the O. Observation becomes observación. It's almost the same, but it doesn't sound the same, right? And that's just because I'm pronouncing the vowels differently. But when you look at it, I just changed that T to a C, I put an accent over the O, and now we have a Spanish word. Amazing, right? It's a pattern. But let's take it a step further. In our pattern, if the word we created in Spanish, here we have observación, ends in ACION, I can make it a verb. And does it? Yes, it does. So all I have to do is drop the CION and add an R, and it becomes observar, which means to observe. It's not conjugated or anything, but it's a verb. You just made a verb. Now, you'll have to tweak it. There's some spelling changes. It doesn't work all the time. Probably works about 95% of the time, but it's a pattern. Now, when I teach this to folks, I actually teach it backwards as well. When I mean backwards, it means if I just said, how would you say to observe in Spanish, you might be like, wow, I don't know how to say observe, Paul. If I said, can you think of a TION noun for that verb? You think, observation, observación, acción, observar. That's how you think of it backwards. So that's a pattern in Spanish, and we linked it to your English. Now let's see if you can apply it. Take a look at these English verbs: to participate, to cooperate, to create, to confirm, and to verify. Now, if you'd never learned Spanish before and you didn't just learn that pattern, and I said, hey, translate these into Spanish, you'd been like, I got nothing, Paul. But these all follow that pattern. You look at to participate, and the verb would be participar. How do we get that? Because we're like to participate. Oh, participation. Okay. Participación. Does it end in acción? Yes. Drop the ción. Participar. I get it. Cooperate. Cooperation, right? We're like, okay, let's play it out again. We get cooperar. To create, creation, creación, crear. Got it. To confirm, confirmar. See, we're getting faster at this. To verify, verification. Might take a little longer on that one. Verificación, verificar. Verificar, you've got them. Participar, cooperar, crear, confirmar, and verificar. You can learn lots of different patterns to just plug your verbs into. For example, here's one. Antes de plus the infinitive, the unconjugated verb. And it means before doing something. Antes de participar. Before participating. How would you say before cooperating? Antes de cooperar. So focus on patterns in the language. There are tons of them, and you're going to be able to just kind of pop them together to make sentences. And if you're wondering how you're going to learn these patterns, well, just follow my channel, because I talk about them like literally all the time. All right, let's move on to my second tip. In order to reach fluency, you're going to have to be willing to leave your comfort zone and practice speaking the language with native speakers. Yes, folks, you have to talk to people. And I'm going to tell you, one way to do that without even leaving home is through a site called Lingopie. Lingopie is an online language school that offers live 1-hour classes 24 hours a day. You can choose between private classes for one-on-one attention or join small group classes that only have a maximum of 5 students. That means more speaking time for you and personalized feedback. Each class is arranged by topic and level. So whether you're a complete beginner or looking to refine your advanced skills, Lingota's got you covered. And here's the best part. You can even skip around from different topics and levels as you see fit. You don't have to take these in a particular order. And if you're looking to push yourself to learn Spanish even faster and save money at the same time, you should check out Lingota's Language Sprint Challenge. It's a 2-month learning challenge designed to supercharge your progress. You can choose the sprint with 15 classes per month or the super sprint with 30 classes per month. Well, there's an incentive to stick to it and complete it, because if you do and you follow all the rules, you can earn 50% of your money back or even more in class credits. That's an incentive. That'll keep you on there, keep you going. I have a link to Lingota in the description section of this video, and I've also pinned it to the top of the comments. I suggest you check it out. It's pretty awesome. All right, let's move on to tip number 3. Don't translate whole sentences in your head from English to Spanish prior to speaking. I know you're doing it, folks, because we all do it at some point. We can't help it. It just doesn't work. It just slows the conversation down so much. It's useless. Now, I know some of the folks out there are like, well, Paul, you shouldn't be translating from your own language anyway. You should just be, thinking in Spanish. Really? You should? That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I'll just do that, because that seems so much easier. You'll get there in time, where Spanish just makes more sense to you, but that's not going to be immediate. It's normal to translate from your language. So here's the strategy to help you do that, so you can still be translating in your head, but still be having a conversation. Think of your sentence like a train. Now, you don't have to hook on all the cars right away, but you need to get the locomotive going. You've got to get it out there. That's where you say something so the person knows you're going to speak. This is where sentence starters will come in. This is just getting the conversation going. A good one is, bueno. They say something, you're like, bueno. Now they know it's coming. They're waiting. And that gives you, just a second to kind of pop on other train cars. If you need more time, you can actually put 2 of your sentence starters together. You can be like, bueno, creo que. And then you can pop on other, little fragments or patterns that are also usually groups or chunks of words. Bueno, creo que la mejor manera de hacer esto, the best way to do this, es tener un plan. Is to have a plan. And I know I kind of dragged that one out, but I want to show you that you control the speed of the conversation. You can slow it down, and if you make a mistake, you can always back up. You could be like, creo que la mejor, no, ¿sabes qué? This is going to take some practice, but it's going to get easier in time. I promise you. This is a big one. This is really a big one. And if you've been sitting at that intermediate level and you're just having trouble, having conversations, that might just snap you out of it. That brings us to tip number 4. Learn vocabulary in chunks. So what am I talking about? Sentence starters are a good example. Another great sentence starter that I teach folks right out of the chute is en cuanto a, which means regarding or in reference to. Bueno, en cuanto a lo que dijiste ayer. Well, in reference to what you said yesterday. See? I'm popping these things together. And that's another one. The lo que, that's one. And we say, what somebody said a lot, so the lo que dijiste, that even becomes another pattern you'll be using all the time. Tons of patterns, folks. Just binge watch my videos and learn all these patterns. I want to mention under this particular tip that it's really important to learn verbs with their appropriate preposition, especially if that preposition doesn't match the English equivalent. I'll show you what I mean. In English, we dream of people. In Spanish, you dream with people. It's a different preposition. So if you'd only learned soñar, meant to dream, chances are you'd be using the wrong preposition when you actually made a sentence. So in Spanish, we want to learn it as soñar con, to dream with someone or something. Anoche, María soñó con su abuelito. Last night, Maria dreamt of her grandfather, but literally dreamt with her grandfather. Another example of that is in Spanish. We don't fall in love with people, we get enamored of them. Hace muchos años me enamoré de mi esposa. Many years ago, I fell in love with my wife, but literally, I became enamored of my wife. I have a few videos on my channel where I talk about certain verbs and prepositions so you can learn them. You can just do a little search. I'm sure you'll find that. That brings us to tip number 5. Read in Spanish. Reading is super important. It's going to expose you to new vocabulary and grammar and context. And the way I would recommend people read is to really take your time with it. Don't try to skim and just get it out of context. Pay attention to the constructions. Also, if you're going to look up something online, look it up in Spanish, Try to read it that way. It'll help you. Let's look at tip number 6. Practice with yourself. People always tell me, Paul, I don't have anybody to practice with, so, I just didn't do anything today. You're always with you, right? Narrate your day. Think about it. You wake up in the morning and you're like, me desperté. I woke up. Then you get up. Me levanté. And then you're like, estoy tomando un cafecito. I'm drinking a coffee. That's how you're going to find gaps in your vocabulary. That's how you're going to practice your pronunciation. You could do it in your head, but I think you should do it out loud. That brings us to tip number 7. Set realistic study goals and stick with them. And when I say, realistic, what am I talking about? Well, I meet people who are just starting out learning Spanish, and I'm like, how much time are you going to put into studying each day? And they're like, hours, Paul, like 3 or 4 hours. Are you going to stick with that really? Chances are you're not. So what I recommend is set realistic goals, something that you're going to do every day, at least a minimum you're going to put into this language. Now, sometimes you're going to feel like studying more, do it, but never do less than this. Viewers often ask me what type of a study schedule I recommend or what did I use. I used this one back in the day. 20 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at lunch, and 20 minutes just before I went to sleep. And this was my minimum. I mean, some days I would do more, but this is my minimum every day. I don't care if I was sick, tired, I'm doing it. That 20 minutes in the morning was usually over breakfast. I would review vocabulary from the day before, might do some reading, pick out some new patterns or vocabulary, that I would focus on that day. And then I'd just start my day. At lunch, I would normally review the vocabulary that I was, learned at breakfast or was trying to learn. But I will tell you that the most important study session of the whole day was that one just before I went to sleep. My retention was always highest. Whatever I covered then, I was more likely to remember. I don't know if it just kind of milled over in my head, in my dreams, whatever. Don't skip that one, all right? That one is super important. Tip number 8, don't be afraid of grammar. You're going to hear people out there and they'll be like, you don't have to learn grammar to learn a language. In fact, just ignore the grammar. That's some of the dumbest advice I have ever heard, ever. What have I been preaching in this video and all my videos? Learn patterns, right? Little snippets of the language. Well, grammar is a blueprint of the language. Someone has already figured out these patterns for you and they put it all in a little book and called it grammar. So you don't have to figure them out. It just makes it so much easier to learn the language. The thing that seems to intimidate viewers most is actually the English grammatical terms. When I start saying things like indicative and subjunctive and verbs and nouns, they go, Paul, I haven't thought of those terms in forever. Do I have to learn those? Yes, you do. Because it's going to make it so much easier for you to learn Spanish. For example, when I'm trying to teach you a pattern, and I say the adjective will follow the noun in these types of sentences, if you don't know what an adjective or a noun are, that's not going to help you. I can't just say there's going to be a word and that word's going to follow another word, but I don't want to, call them anything, so you work it out. That doesn't work. So just embrace the grammar and make your life much easier. And it will also help your English, because one day when somebody talks about an adverb or something, you'll know what they're talking about. And that brings me to my last tip, tip number 9. And I know some folks are like, why tip 9, Paul? Shouldn't you just gone to 10? Yeah, I could have, but I'm stopping at 9. Focus on the Spanish spoken in one particular country. Each Spanish-speaking country is going to have their own terminology and colloquialisms and accent. That's a big one, accent. One of the more difficult aspects of learning a language is training your ear to understanding the spoken language. Well, if you're constantly listening to people from different Spanish-speaking countries, that just becomes more difficult. Compare it to English. Different, English accents you hear around the world. Have you ever had difficulty understanding one of them? I know I have. I've spoken English my whole life. I'll watch things on the BBC and maybe somebody's from Ireland or something. I put the subtitles on because I'm missing things. So make your life easier. Focus on one particular country. And I know that advice is going to frustrate some folks watching because you're like, I just want to travel everywhere. I just want to understand general Spanish. Okay, you can do that. It's just going to be a little bit more challenging for you in terms of, well, the accent's going to be a thing. Colloquialisms are going to be a thing, and even what vocabulary you choose is going to be a thing. For example, what are you going to call a car? Coche or carro? What are you going to call the sidewalk? Banqueta, acera. What are you going to call the trunk of a car? Cajuela, that's in Mexico. Baúl, maletero. Vocabulary changes, so make your life easier, choose a country. Well, there you have it. Those are my tips to develop your strategy to learn Spanish quickly and reach fluency. If you enjoyed the video, just do me a favor and give it a thumbs up. And thank you very much for watching.